Hey guys, tonight we're ripping apart the glossy, blood-soaked fantasy of the medieval assassin. Forget the Hollywood version. Silent, deadly, and, let's be honest, probably quite warm. You were more likely to die from the cold, the hunger, or your own damn client's betrayal than from any target's guards. Medieval assassins didn't face shadowy conspiracies. They faced frozen fingers, unreliable poisons, and the very real terror of a client vanishing without a whisper of payment. So, let's peel back the layers of romanticized nonsense and uncover why this wasn't just a job you wouldn't want, but quite possibly the worst career path in the entire frigid history of mankind. It reeks of wet wool and rotting leaves, clinging to the inside of your nose. Your breath fogs in front of you, each exhale a little slower, a little shallower than the last. 3 days now without a proper meal, just ice-hard roots and the gnawing ache in your gut. 2 toes, black from frostbite, are a constant, agonizing reminder of where you are. The knife in your hand, it used to be for gutting fish, for skinning a rabbit if you were lucky. Now, it's for gutting men. Don't let anyone tell you about shadowy guilds or mysterious benefactors. There was no training montage, no wise old mentor. You're just another starving body, a discarded peasant, with nothing left to steal and absolutely no one left to mourn you. So, before you get comfortable, maybe pull your blanket a little tighter. Take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And let me know in the comments where you're tuning in from and what time it is for you. It's always fascinating to see who's joining us from around the world. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum. And let's ease into tonight's journey together. Winter isn't just a season, it's a plague that empties villages faster than any invading army. Fields lie frozen, hard as iron. Grain stores dwindle, and the healthy, the lucky, they hoard what little they have. The weak, they disappear into the trees with the last straggling leaves, like shadows claimed by the encroaching dark. No one comes looking. Some freeze to death. Some turn to banditry, a short, brutal life requiring strong arms and quick feet, qualities frost tends to steal with ruthless efficiency. So when a traveller, probably just as desperate as you, but with a few coins to rattle, offers 5 silver pieces for a nobleman's death, you don't ask why he wants it done. You just ask where. Because 5 silver coins, even for a murder, can feel like a godsend when your stomach's trying to eat itself. Now, picture your first client. He's not some cloaked master. He's likely a merchant's clerk, face chapped raw from the cold, eyes shifting around like a cornered rat. He'll insist on meeting you at the crossroads after sundown, not a soul around. He'll promise you half up front, swear on his mother's grave. His cloak, though, it smells like cheap rosemary and expensive lies. You've held worse. You always have. Beyond the meagre glow of a scavenged campfire, the woods creak and groan under the crushing weight of the cold. Every branch is a snapping bone, every rustle a phantom footstep. Hunger, it doesn't just make you miserable, it makes practical people of us all. The church, with its warm halls and full coffers, calls what you're about to do a mortal sin. The law, with its fat judges and sturdy gallows, calls it hanging. You call it supper. Tomorrow, you'll be skulking through the knee-deep snow towards some lord's distant manor. A walking target against the white. Tonight, you gnaw strips of half-rotten hair, its stink making your throat close, and try to pretend it's a feast. Hollywood always gets that wrong. The victim doesn't just silently crumple, they wheeze, a terrible, desperate sound like a dying animal. Their nails scrabble at your wrists, leaving hot trails on your freezing skin. It feels shockingly warm on your freezing hands, almost a relief for a moment, before the cold reclaims it, and your fingers start to stiffening again. The clerk, your shifty client, he swore the Lord would be alone in his chambers. The serving girl, startled by the struggle, she screams, her voice tearing through the silent manor. You don't think. You just run. 2 days later, bruised and shivering, you creep back to the crossroads, the site of your treacherous meeting. No clerk, no promised purse, just a set of fresh hoofprints leading south, mocking you. The nearest town, you discover, now boasts new posters on its gallows, a crude drawing perhaps of you, perhaps of anyone who looks vaguely desperate and hooded. The reward, it says, is 10 silvers. Alive, preferably. It was about a target who was dumber and slower than you, less desperate, more trusting. The next one, you realise with a cold dread settling in your stomach, won't be. And that, my friends, is how survival came with a price. A price that felt utterly worthless. The coins, if you ever got them, never stayed in your palm long enough to even grow warm. You knew this, of course, before you ever accepted the contract, but starvation has a way of turning even the most cynical wretch into an optimist. The nobleman lies dead in his chambers, the blood still glistening wet on your knife, quickly cooling. Now you wait, hunched at the frost-rimed fence post, exactly where the merchant had promised to pay the other half. Dawn creeps across the field, painting the snow in shades of pale grey. No hoofbeats approach, no jingle of purses, just the crows, perched on bare branches, watching you with unnerving patience, like they know something you don't. And they usually do. Those desperate men, like you, found knives. And everyone, from the lord to the lowly scribe, pretended the entire sordid arrangement had some shred of honour. Lords used third-party messengers, often masked or hooded. Wealthy merchants hired travelling scribes to draft notes, their ink-stained fingers never quite clean. Even bishops, pious as they were, employed a discreet go-between when an inconvenient relative or rival needed to quietly disappear. No names were written down, no witnesses who'd ever talk. The law didn't actually hunt killers, it hunted killers who left evidence. And you were expected to leave none. You stamp your feet trying to get some feeling back into your numb toes. You blow on your fingers, watching your breath ghost away in the frigid air, trying not to think about the blisters already forming where your cheap boots have split. The church bell tolls 7 times, its muffled clang carried on the biting wind. By 8, you're kicking ice clots off the fence post, the anger starting to warm you more than your threadbare cloak. By 9, you've pried up 3 frost-loosened nails from the fence, mentally adding them to your dwindling arsenal of desperation. When the sun finally reaches its peak, a pale, indifferent disk in the sky, you admit it, the merchant isn't coming. Maybe he never intended to. Maybe that serving girl's scream reached the wrong, powerful ears. Maybe the noble's suddenly wealthy widow offered him even better terms to point fingers elsewhere. Every assassin learns the brutal, unwritten hierarchy of betrayal. Clients who simply vanish before paying, they rank low, annoying, a waste of freezing hours but routine. Worse are those who pay with false coin, lead and brass pieces that flake grey when bitten, leaving a foul taste in your mouth and nothing in your belly. Worst of all, the true masters of treachery are the ones who send armed men instead of silver. You check the tree line every few breaths now, your eyes darting, your heart thumping. That rustle in the leafless woods? It could be a squirrel. Or it could be 2 crossbowmen, their breath fogging like predatory ghosts, already lining up their shots. Sometimes, the deception was even more creative, more cruel. A cloth merchant in Flanders, a man renowned for his exquisite tapestries, paid his killers with beautifully embroidered purses, all stitched with his distinctive family crest. Easy to trace, easier to confiscate. A few decades earlier, a duke near Burgundy, a man of legendary stinginess, settled his debts with promissory notes signed in disappearing ink. The bitter winter air would turn the parchment blank by morning. No one protested. Who, after all, would admit to taking assassination contracts in court? Your Honour, the payment for the Duke's inconvenient cousin has vanished. You'd be laughed out, then dragged to the gallows yourself. You pocket the nails, their cold metal a small hard comfort against your thigh. Snow starts falling again, soft and insidious. The crows lift off in a black cloud, heading toward where the nobleman's household will now be burning his blood-stained sheets, eager to erase your grim work. Counting coins, even imaginary ones, trains the mind to think in certain brutal ways. That's a wool cloak lined with real rabbit fur, enough to survive another month. 5. A week at a tavern, maybe some actual food. 3. A loaf of bread, and the chance to vomit in peace behind a stable unseen. Some greenhorn killers, they try threatening their clients. Bad idea. Dead men can't testify, but living, powerful ones can invent dazzling, convincing lies before the magistrate, ensuring your public execution. You've heard the stories. Assassins executed for stealing holy relics they never touched, for poisoning wells they'd never seen, for a litany of invented crimes, all concocted the moment they dared to demand fair payment. It was always cheaper to kill the killer. You pick at the scab on your wrist where the nobleman's signet ring gouged you, a small, painful memento. Survival requires new rules now, rules etched in betrayal. Never take contracts from men who smell of rose oil. They're rich enough to laugh off debts and send you to the gallows. Avoid scribes with ink-stained cuffs. They draft too many legal pardons to truly fear you. And steer clear of anyone who mentions paying you at their country estate. Country estates have dungeons, often with surprisingly fresh chains. Dusk stains the falling snow, a bruised purple making the world feel even colder. You've eaten nothing since yesterday's crust of black bread. Hunger, that relentless gnawing beast, makes you reckless. The tavern where the merchant, your treacherous client, drinks sits 2 miles west. You could go there. You could kick down his door, could press your knife, even a dull one, to his soft, lying throat. Could watch his eyes widen as he stammers about misunderstandings, about payment coming soon. Because the bartender there knows your face. The scene you shuffle in, always alone, always watchful. Because the merchant's bodyguard, you remember, carries an axe with a 2-foot blade and looks like he enjoys using it. Because 3 witnesses saw you near the noble's house last night, and they'll remember the shadowy figure fleeing. Instead, you turn south, toward the next town, toward the next desperate, treacherous offer. The nails in your pocket clink like tiny, worthless coins, a grim anthem to your existence. In this trade, the only guarantee was betrayal. And betrayal, you were about to discover, was the least of your worries. The dagger slips from your grip again. That's the 3rd time tonight, a cold, hard fact. Your fingers stopped bending properly hours ago. Now they're just pale, stiff hooks, barely clinging to the hilt. The blade itself is dull anyway. You stole it off a drunk merchant last autumn, and months of scraping against frozen door jambs and icy stones haven't done it any favours. The metal catches the meagre moonlight as it falls, vanishing with a soft puff into the snowbank beside the stable. No clang, no telltale sound. Some master assassin you are. Winter, that merciless bastard, robs you of every single advantage. That stolen, tattered cloak dragging through the snow behind you. Its hem is stiff with ice, leaving a trail even a half-blind guard, half asleep on patrol, could follow. The garrote in your pocket, carefully braided from stolen horsehair, its frozen strands snapped like twigs when you try to test it. Even your footsteps, usually a whisper, betray you. The usual prowler's crouch is impossible when your knees creak like unoiled hinges, announcing your presence with every agonizing step. You can't feel the treacherous roof tiles under your numb feet. Can't taste the frigid air for the telltale scent of torch smoke or roasting meat. Can't hear approaching footsteps over the constant, high-pitched ringing in your frostbitten ears. Cold, that silent partner in your misery, reshapes weapons in unpredictable, deadly ways. Sword grips splinter in frozen hands, leaving your fingers raw and exposed. Arrow fletching clumps with ice, sending carefully aimed shots veering wildly sideways. Lockpicks snap off in stiffened, frozen mechanisms, sealing your fate. One desperate killer in Burgundy, the stories go, allegedly tried to poison a lord's wine by freezing the toxin into a decorative ice cube, only to watch the servant pluck it out with tongs and toss it casually into the fire. Crossbows misfire when their strings stiffen with cold. Daggers shatter when driven into wood or bone, leaving you unarmed and exposed. The colder it gets, the more your tools, your only friends, turn against you. Tonight's job was, ostensibly, simple: slit the merchant's throat while he slept, a quiet, efficient end. You'd practice the motion endlessly. Lean over the bed, left hand clamps his mouth, right hand draws the blade across his neck, a swift, silent death. But practice didn't account for fingers that won't close, didn't account for how loudly your chattering teeth would sound in the silent, frigid chamber. When you finally managed to get the dagger to his throat, your arm shook so violently that the first cut barely broke skin. He woke, not with a whimper, but with a guttural scream that echoed through the manor. You ran. Now here you are, crouched in a snowdrift, utterly exposed, watching torches bob through the manor windows as they search for you. Seasoned killers, the ones who lived long enough to become legends, or at least long enough to die in a slightly warmer ditch, paid meticulous attention to temperature. They knew to warm their blades near campfires before night work. Cold steel sticks to skin, making silent draws impossible. They kept spare knives wrapped in oilcloth under their clothes, where precious body heat kept the metal workable. The smart ones, the ones with a shred of sense, carried blunt wooden clubs in winter, ugly weapons, yes, but reliable when frost turned swordplay into a fool's gamble. You went in with your usual tools and learned the hard way, as always. You spot the dagger's hilt, a dark, inviting promise jutting from the snow. Retrieval should be simple. Reach down, grab it, move on. Bending sends daggers of pain, sharp and unforgiving, up your frozen thighs. When you finally manage to close your hand around the grip, your fingers refuse to tighten, refusing to obey. They'll have dogs out soon, and dogs, those relentless hunters, love tracking stumbling, slow-moving prey, especially one leaving a scent trail of pure terror. Your fingernails tear against the mortar, leaving trails of blood in the ice. Your toes skid off icy ledges. That one winter in Brittany, an assassin reportedly fell 3 stories trying to scale a glazed-over tower, survived the horrific drop, but lay groaning in the snow until guards found him at dawn. An easy, frozen capture. Another in Saxony got his belt loop caught on a gargoyle and froze to death before morning. A grotesque statue of failure. You're luckier. You're luckier, brittle and leafless, but thick enough to grip. You can't feel the puncture, but dark, telling blood dots the ice below you. Crossing the rooftop should be easier, a silent, shadowy path. It's not. Frost makes the tiles treacherous, slick and unforgiving. Your knees hit the slate again and again as you crawl, each impact sending a fresh jolt of agony through your frozen joints. Breath comes in ragged gasps that fog your vision, creating a halo of icy despair. The dagger's back in your belt now, a useless weight, but what's the point? Even if you reach the merchant's window again, you'd never pull off the kill. Not with hands like these, not with lips so blue they vibrate uncontrollably when you grit your teeth. The cold, that ubiquitous enemy, reshapes battles in subtle, deadly ways. Swords feel heavier in the dense winter air. Bowstrings lose tension, sending arrows short or wide. Mail coats stiffen into inflexible cages, hindering movement and making you clank like a walking blacksmith. A summer ambush lets you melt into shadow. Winter leaves you starkly outlined against the snow, every exhale a puff of giveaway steam. Even victims behave differently. They sleep deeper in the bone-chilling cold, yes, but they also bank fires higher and lock shutters tighter, making entry a symphony of creaks and groans. Servants deliver midnight mulled wine to keep warm. Guards stamp their feet and rub their hands, staying wakeful through sheer, miserable discomfort. You reach the outer wall finally, just as the wind picks up, a howling malicious force. The torch below, a solitary beacon in the darkness, gutters wildly, sending shadows dancing across the wall you're clinging to like a desperate fly. For 3 terrible, agonizing seconds, your silhouette stretches clear and sharp across the courtyard, a black target against the white snow. Somewhere to your left, a guard curses loudly about the draft. His chainmail jingles as he turns, his eyes scanning the darkness. You stop moving, stop breathing. The wind dies, leaving an oppressive silence. He mutters something to his companion, a casual, terrifying dismissal, and walks on. The chapel's eaves sport icicles long as daggers, ready to snap and clatter onto roofs below, announcing your presence with a chilling symphony of ice. Every window shutter's latched tight against the cold, their hinges stiff with disuse, screaming when forced open. You try one near the Lord's chambers. It groans like a dying man when you finally force it open, a sound that feels like a gunshot. Inside, a child's sleepy voice asks about the noise. A nursemaid, bless her oblivious heart, reassures them it's just the wind. Your pulse hammers, a frantic drumbeat loud enough you fear to drown out their voices. Let's talk about locks in winter. Iron bolts contract in the cold, making them harder to slide, harder to pick. Frost warps wooden doors just enough to make them stick, to resist your subtle force. Padlocks freeze solid, their mechanisms jammed with ice, rendering your hard-won skills useless. That's if you even reach them. Most high-value targets nested behind 3 separate locking systems, each guarded by different staff bribed to watch each other. One assassination attempt, recorded in the dusty annals of failure, failed because the killer couldn't pick a frozen lock before the maid arrived with bedtime wine, catching him red-handed, or rather, cold-handed. The chamberlain's conducting some midnight inventory, a tedious, ill-timed chore. A scribe reads off items while servants count silks and spices. The Lord's personal guard, a hulking brute, leans casually against his master's door, sharpening a dagger with slow, deliberate strokes, the rasp of stone on steel. A terrifying lullaby. Your original plan, to sneak in during the Lord's private prayers, when he was most vulnerable, crumbles when you spot the 2 additional guards at the prayer alcove. Winter, you learn with a bitter taste in your mouth, means noblemen travel with full retinues, even within the supposed sanctuary of their own homes. Crouched behind a tapestry that smells of mildew and buried regrets, you reconsider every single life choice that led you to this freezing, terrifying moment. Thatch, you recall, makes better cover than stone in winter. Villagers don't expect assassins in their haylofts. Townhouses have predictable servant schedules, easier to exploit. Even wealthy merchants rarely bother with more than a single, sleepy night watchman. The tapestry, thin and inadequate, smells of mould and regret, heavy, suffocating regret. The cold isn't just an obstacle, it's an active, malicious participant in your failure. Shivers make your hands tremble too much for precise lockpicking. Frozen ground amplifies every shuffled step, turning your stealth into a clumsy stomp. The pre-dawn hours, when targets should be deepest asleep, instead find them tossing under extra blankets or calling for warmed wine, their very discomfort keeping them alive. Guards cluster around braziers, their warmth directly in your planned escape routes. Even your black wool cloak, usually your best friend, stands out against fresh snowfall, like an ink blot on pristine parchment, screaming your presence. Near dawn, defeated and shivering, you retreat the way you came. The descent is worse than the climb, far worse. Ice has formed in your earlier footholds, smoothing them into death traps. Twice you slip, dangling by one hand, your fingers screaming in agony until you find purchase again. The moat looks darker now, a gaping maw, its unfrozen centre wider, more menacing. Guards on the walls start coughing and spitting over the sides. One particularly disgusting glob lands warm on your wrist, a final insult. Dawn light, weak and sickly, creeps across the courtyard as you finally drop into the dead grass beyond the moat. The Lord's bell rings for morning prayers, a chilling, cheerful sound. Dogs bark somewhere near the kennels, their barks undoubtedly for you. Assassins avoided winter castles for good reason, you realise with bitter clarity. The season turned every advantage against you. Guards grew more alert, sharpened by discomfort. Structures became more treacherous, actively trying to kill you. Targets surrounded themselves with extra layers of protection, both literal and metaphorical. Even successful infiltrations often ended with killers trapped inside by sudden blizzards, their escape routes buried until the cruel mockery of spring. The castle wasn't just a building, it was a death trap. And death, you knew with every frozen fibre of your being, was always watching. It smells like old incense and someone else's sweat. Probably the real Brother Tobias, who now lies, hopefully unconscious, in a snowdrift outside the abbey gates. You keep the hood low, hands tucked deep into sleeves to hide a dagger clenched so tight your knuckles ache. This should work, you told yourself. Monks move quietly, ask few questions, everyone ignores them, at least that's what you thought before the gatekeeper squinted at you and, with an unnerving gleam in his eye, asked about Vespers. Winter makes disguises both easier and harder, a cruel paradox. Frost-reddened noses and chapped lips explain your flushed face. Thick, clumsy layers hide weapon bulges. But cold also means fewer travellers on the roads, more reason for suspicious locals to scrutinise every stranger, to look a little too long. That bundle of firewood you're carrying, as part of your act, part of your pious charade? It's the third one you've hauled today. Real monks, the ones who actually live here, would have finished their chores before noon. Your shoulders burn from the pretense, the effort of simply being someone you're not. Servants, always the keenest observers, always notice the details. The way you don't automatically step aside for senior clergy, a subtle breach of protocol. How you hesitate at the refectory's complex seating chart. Why your hands bear none of the ink stains that mark actual scribes. You catch a kitchen boy staring at your boots, too clean for winter mud, too fine for a mendicant's meagre allowance. When you accidentally bump a brazier, the coals hiss against a splash of spilled wine. The steward's eyes narrow, just a fraction. You were meant to be invisible, a background hum. Instead, you're compiling a ledger of tiny, accumulating mistakes. Monastic life, you quickly discover, operates on routines, on ancient rhythms you don't know, don't understand. Meal bells, prayer cycles. The specific, infuriating way brothers fold their hands during grace. You fake a coughing fit when the abbot calls for the day's scripture reading, hoping to blend in. My med illness, you quickly learn, only works so many times. Already the infirmarian keeps eyeing you with a professional's suspicious interest. The chapel's cold stone floor seeps through your stolen sandals as you kneel, back to the wall so no one sees the knife under your thigh. When the brothers chant their Latin hymns, your mouth moves silently, forming meaningless shapes. Latin was never your strength. Let's talk materials, or rather, the lack thereof. A proper disguise requires layers, subtle touches you simply don't have. False beards cobbled together from goat hair and beeswax melt and droop comically near hearths. Stolen uniforms, meant for a fatter man, hang wrong on your starved frame. That servant's smock you bargained for turns out to be nothing more than a grain sack with armholes. the miller's mark still visible when you raise your arms, a branding of your true status. Winter's one dubious blessing, everyone wraps themselves in scarves, hats, and hoods. Though the Abbey's perpetually suspicious dog seems to recognize that yours came from a different flock. The greatest threat you find isn't guards or gates, it's casual conversation. A passing monk, with genuine concern in his eyes, asks after Brother Tobias's rheumatism. You mumble something vague about winter aches. He frowns, a small crease of confusion. Apparently Tobias was cured last summer by relics. They exchange looks, knowing looks. Now 2 more brothers linger near your corridor, their presence too casual. Your left sleeve feels damp. Is that blood seeping through where the dagger nicked you earlier, a betrayal from within? Gatekeepers, the first line of defense, trained to spot imposters. They note who arrives with which caravans, remember faces from feast days, know which travelers belong to which households. When you improvise Norwich, the actual Norwich monk, a corpulent man with a surprisingly keen ear, chokes on his ale, his eyes wide with recognition. Disguises fail in increments, not sudden dramatic revelations. Then the whispered questions, the uncomfortable silences. Finally, the armed men casually stationing themselves at exits, their presence too accidental to be an accident. You feel it happening now, the slow, tightening noose. How the cellar doors mysteriously lock behind you, an invisible barrier. That huddle of lay brothers who stop talking, their heads snapping up when you pass. Your knife, clutched in your sleeve, weighs heavier with each step, a silent, damning presence. Without crowds to vanish into, every footstep echoes loudly on the stone floors. That bed you claimed in the dormitory, a pile of straw in a cold corner. It's the one missing its straw mattress. The brothers, you notice, take turns keeping vigil and watching you. Moonlight through the latrine window shows someone's drawn a crude fish in the frost on your assigned prayer book. Early Christian symbol or an accusation of fraud. Your bladder aches from avoiding the courtyard privy all day, another indignity. The robe's worst feature, you discover, is its utter inability to conceal weapons. Draped fabric makes drawing anything slower, a clumsy, fumbling motion. The rope belt tangles with your dagger's hilt. When you kneel, the wooden rosary beads clatter loudly against hidden lockpicks, a symphony of your treachery. Earlier, you saw the armourer counting his knives twice, a casual, pointed gesture. The infirmarian keeps feeling his own sleeve, patting it as if checking for something. They're waiting for proof. They're just waiting. Midnight approaches, a slow, agonizing crawl. Your target, the abbot's corrupt treasurer, a man who smells of too much wine and too little prayer. But 4 monks now lounge near his doorway, conspicuously awake, their eyes too bright. The one sharpening a penknife on his thumbnail smiles, a thin, unnerving line when you pass. In the buttery, 2 servants loudly discuss how heretics burn, their voices pointedly loud. Your candle gutters in the draught, plunging you into momentary, terrifying darkness. The truth about disguise, the one no one ever tells you, is that it relies almost entirely on the audience's indifference. Winter stripped that away, leaving you exposed. Short, dark days meant more people packed together in lit, warm spaces, with nothing to do but watch each other. Frozen roads kept strangers uncommon enough to notice, a novelty, a potential threat. Even servants, normally focused solely on their own miserable survival, had time to ponder why that itinerant preacher's hands lacked calluses. Morning finds you taking fresh air, by the midden heap, the stench of refuse, a welcome familiar comfort. The real Brother Tobias, a figure of righteous fury, stumbles into view, hatless and furious, his face a mask of rage. His forehead sports a bruise the shape of your boot heel. Your hand drifts toward your belt. But the stolen robe has no belt, no sheath, just miles of itchy wool, and the growing, chilling certainty that these men know exactly who you're not. In winter, everyone noticed the stranger. And strangers you found didn't last long. The hayloft creaks under your meager weight, a sound that feels deafening in the silence. You press your face deeper into the rough straw, praying the potent scent of cow dung and mildew masks your own stale sweat, your fear. By dawn, the sheriff's men were kicking indoors and you were running. Now, every voice outside, every rustle, could be pointing at this barn, at you. Winter loneliness isn't just empty. It's watching your breath fog in air, too cold for conversation, too hostile for companionship. No drinking partners to vouch for your whereabouts. No kind neighbours who'd miss you if you simply vanished. Farmers stockpile firewood, their families huddle together for warmth and comfort. You stockpile stolen cheese under floorboards, nibbling mould off the edges when the hunger gets bad enough to make you weep. Last month's letter from your sister, the one you can't read but keep folded in your boot, a relic of a life long gone. It would burn quick in the farmhouse half below. Proof you were once somebody's child. But smoke rises. Dogs follow smells. Assassins, the real ones, died from isolation as often as they died from blades. Frostbite took fingers when no one was around to rub life back into them. Wounds festered without assistance to stitch them, to offer even the most rudimentary care. One killer in the chronicles, a grim cautionary tale, reportedly choked to death on stolen bread. No one to pound his back, no one to even watch him die. You've learned to pack snow around sprained ankles, an agonizing chill for a desperate relief. To bite leather until your jaw aches when digging arrowheads from your own thigh. To vomit quietly after eating questionable, often rotting, meat, lest you draw unwanted attention. The real training wasn't knife work. It was surviving your own mistakes with absolutely no safety net, no one to catch you. Shelter, that most basic human need, is the first compromise. Abandoned hunting blinds reek of old blood, a warning. Mills have too many creaking gears, too many noises that could mask your own. That perfect-looking shepherd's hut, a warm, welcoming beacon. Already occupied by bandits who'd knife you for your boots, then your cloak, then your fingernails. You wind up wedged between church buttresses, half sheltered from the biting wind, listening to hymns you'll never be clean enough to join. At least the graveyard's earth stays soft longer. Digging emergency hiding holes gets impossibly harder once the ground freezes solid. Trust is a luxury you cannot, absolutely cannot, afford. That sympathetic widow feeding you stew. Her son, you discover later, is the undersheriff with a keen eye for strangers. The chatty lumberjack sharing ale. His cousin's the man whose throat you cut last month. Even fellow outcasts, those you might expect to find camaraderie with, rat on each other. One wandering minstrel, strumming a mournful tune, turned out to be a bounty hunter with a ballad about your crimes, sung with a chilling accuracy. Now you flinch, your muscles tensing, when travellers greet you casually on the road. Disappearing, truly vanishing, leaves its own traces. You know, the blacksmith remembers selling you that particular dagger. The whore, with her knowing eyes, noticed your missing fingertip. The baker's daughter, too young to lie well, saw blood flecks on your cloak hem. Small towns have long memories and short tempers, especially in winter. You develop tricks, chewing acrid herbs to change your breath, rubbing ashes into your hair to fake grey, adopting limps you can quickly drop when it's time to run. But the eyes, those haunted darting eyes, they always give you away. Too watchful, too watchful. Months alone, isolated in the brutal cold, twist how you think. You talk to rocks, whispering to them, practicing fluent, convincing lies. Your own voice a strange comfort. You count cracks in ceilings instead of sheep, finding patterns in the decay. You develop elaborate superstitions. If you step on exactly 17 pine needles before the job, maybe the poison will work this time. Sleep comes in ragged bursts, interrupted by imagined footsteps, by the gnawing fear of discovery. Once, you woke screaming from a dream about your mother, only to realize you don't remember her face anymore. Only the idea of her. The physical toll mounts, a slow, inevitable decay. Rotting teeth from a poor, scavenged diet. Crusted lips never quite healing, always cracked and bleeding. A cough that lingers like an unpaid debt, tearing at your lungs. You find yourself envy-blind, watching even the most miserable peasant wheeze by their fires. At least their pain is witnessed, acknowledged. When you hack up something black and foul into the snow, there's no one to tell you if it's bad, if it's the end. No hands to steady the knife when you lance your own abscesses. A crude, painful surgery. Learn this lesson quick, because your body will teach it to you. Bodies break faster when no one cares if you stand up again. Weather, that indifferent force, turns every decision lethal. That tempting shortcut across the frozen river, shimmering deceptively, one wheat patch, and you're under the ice, flailing in the frigid darkness, with no one to hear your thrashing, no one to pull you out. The warm-looking cave, a welcoming dark moor. A bear den. A far more immediate threat than any lord. Even lighting a fire, the most basic comfort, risks smoke drawing unwanted eyes. You develop a sixth sense for which farmsteads will shoot first, and which might, just might, toss crusts to a poor wandering pilgrim. The hungrier you get, the worse your judgment becomes. A slow, self-destructive spiral. Paper, that flimsy, innocuous substance, is the real enemy. Wanted notices, with your crude description, nail your growing infamy to every market cross. Tax records, diligently kept, note strangers passing through, recording your presence. Some anonymous clerk in a warm scriptorium is probably sketching your face right now, based on some drunk's garbled description, imagining horns and fangs. You tear down posters when safe to do so, knowing each one risks leaving skin flakes or telltale smudges. Once you found one where someone had inked horns and fangs onto your likeness, a chilling premonition of how they saw you. Clients are worse than the law. They know your methods. That nobleman you poisoned last year, the one with the inconvenient mistress. His brother, now in charge, hires thugs to check every traveller's hands for callus patterns matching stranglers. The merchant's widow, a woman whose grief turned to vengeance, trained her dogs to scent the particular resin you use on bowstrings. Even successful jobs, the ones where you actually got paid, haunt you. Someone always remembers the quiet man who left town right after the murder, associating your absence with death. The church calls your profession mortal sin, an unforgivable stain on your soul. The law calls it hanging, a public spectacle of brutal justice. You call it Monday or Tuesday or whatever day it happens to be. But there's no one left who'd recognize the bitter joke, no one to share the grim humor with. The last person who knew your real name, who truly knew you, is 8 years buried. The village where you played as a child burned during the last succession war, a casualty of someone else's ambition. Even your reflection in frozen puddles looks like a stranger. Some hollow-eyed wretch with winter's cruel fingers down his collar. Killers in stories have squires, loyal companions, and lavish safe houses. You have chilblains, a constant, itching agony, and a growing pile of places you can never return to. That one decent inn with the loose roof tile, a perfect escape. The sheriff's deputy sleeps there now. The charcoal burner's wife who pretended not to see your weapons, her silence a fragile shield. Found hanged with a sign reading, "Traitor." Every semi-friendly face, every fleeting moment of human connection becomes a future funeral pyre if you linger. Tonight's shelter is a half-collapsed charcoal kiln. The ancient reek of old burns masks your smell from dogs, from men. You'll sleep sitting up, dagger clutched in your fist, ears straining for the crunch of bounty hunters' boots on the frozen ground. Tomorrow brings another nameless road, another town where no one meets your eyes, where every face is a potential enemy. The stars look different here than they did in the last valley. Or maybe, just maybe, you're just forgetting how things should look. In this life, trust was the quickest way to die. And death, you understood, was always close. The rope burns before it even tightens. A searing, unexpected pain. That's your first surprise. The sheriff's men, rough and efficient, didn't bother with proper knots when they dragged you from the grain store. Just a hasty, chafing loop that scorches your wrists as you're hauled through the snow. Your right eye swollen shut from the gatekeeper's fist, a black, painful socket. The left one offers flashing glimpses of your new reality. Muddy boots tramping beside you. A child, wide-eyed with curiosity, throwing ice clods. The butcher's wife, her face a mask of fear, crossing herself as you pass. The scaffold looms ahead, stark against the grey sky. But that's not your true destination. The breaking wheel, an instrument of slow, agonizing death, leans against the executioner's block. Its spokes still dark with last week's blood, winter executions took special grim effort. Frozen ground made digging graves a Herculean task, so towns preferred methods that didn't require burial burning, dismemberment, leaving bodies in iron cages for the crows to feast on. Your crime, the sheriff announces to the gathering crowd, demands something theatrical, a public lesson. Assassins, you see, didn't get simple hangings. They got demonstrations. The executioner's assistant tests the ropes, his movements practiced and cold, while a monk drones about divine justice. Neither of them, you notice, pays any mind to how your battered fingers are working, painstakingly, at the loose nail in the stocks that bind your wrists. Failure, you realize, always started small. Maybe you sneezed at the wrong moment. Maybe the poison clumped uselessly in the cold. Tonight's mistake was trusting the stable boy, a snivelling wretch who swore the Lord took nightly walks in the orchard. Turns out the Lord hasn't left his chambers since the first snow, cosy and warm. The boy got 3 silvers for his tip to the guards. You? Now, the crowd jostles for better views, their breath making a collective fog above the square, a cloud of morbid curiosity. Merchants sell roasted chestnuts and steaming mulled wine, a perverse carnival atmosphere. Someone's little girl, perched on her father's shoulders, points at you, a silent, innocent accusation, like you're just a festival puppet show. Medieval justice, with its flair for the dramatic, truly loved its tools. The breaking wheel, in its cruel ingenuity, broke bones in a precise, excruciating order. Legs first, so you couldn't run, then arms, then ribs. The executioner's hammer had a blunt side for shattering and a spiked side for puncturing. If the crowd, in a rare moment of pity, happened to like you, he might aim wrong and crush your heart early. Judging by the rotten produce already flying at your head, that mercy seems unlikely. They're mostly for show. Your confession came fast once they mentioned burning out your eyes. But tradition, you learn, demands spectacle. Clients, you knew, always betray the captured. That baron who hired you, the one with the fawning smile and the treacherous eyes. He's in the front row now, his face unreadable, clapping politely as the sheriff lists your fabricated crimes. His robes are trimmed with expensive fox fur. His cheeks glow from mulled wine, a picture of prosperous innocence. When your eyes, your one good eye, meet his, he gives a tiny, almost imperceptible shrug, as if to say, "What did you expect?" Easier to execute 3 phantom killers than admit a noble paid-for murder. Dislocation comes first, a sickening, wet crunch. The executioner's assistant pins your left ankle between 2 grooved blocks, his movements chillingly calm. The hammer swings, a heavy, deliberate arc. A wet crunch echoes off the market stalls, a sound that will forever haunt your last moments. Funny you don't scream right away. There's a strange moment of perfect agonizing silence where your brain refuses to accept the pain, refuses to acknowledge the horror. Then it hits, a wave of pure, unadulterated agony, and you're howling like a gutted dog, a sound you barely recognize as your own. The crowd cheers, a chorus of bloodlust. Your vision swims with black spots as they reposition the blocks, grimly, above your knee. The body, you discover, betrays itself, utterly and completely under torture. Your bladder releases, a warm, humiliating gush. Your bowels empty. They'll mock you for it later, of course, but everyone does it. Even the toughest bandits, the most hardened criminals, sob for their mothers when the ribs go, when the spine cracks. What no one ever mentions is the smell. Your own waste steaming in the bitter winter air. The metallic iron stink of fresh blood on cold stone. The reek of the executioner's onion breath as he leans close, sickeningly close, to check your pupils. His hammer, you notice, has a nickname carved into the handle. A grim personalization. You can't focus enough to read it, but you know it's something terrible. Punishment, you realize, served dual purposes in winter. With harvests done and fields frozen solid, executions became prime, grisly entertainment. Villagers, bored and hungry, travelled hours to watch. Children played breaking wheel in the streets afterward, mimicking the horror. The smarter lords, the truly cynical ones, scheduled them just before tax collections. Nothing made peasants hand over their last bit of grain, like seeing a man's entrails fed to pigs in the square. Your suffering, you realize, has value. The sheriff's making speeches about justice, his voice booming. The baron, your client, looks bored now, perhaps planning his next meal. Behind the cooper's shop, two whores place bets on how long you'll last. Breaking, you discover, takes time. Experienced executioners, the true artists of agony, could drag it out for days, keeping victims alive, barely, for maximum suffering. Your man seems middling, he's got the basics right, but his hammer works uneven. One thigh bone splinters clean. The other requires 3 agonizing strikes that send bone chips flying into the cheering, morbid crowd. When they roll the wheel to access your arms, you notice the previous victim's teeth marks in the wood, a silent testament to enduring pain. Someone's carved crude faces into the spokes, maybe a bored guard, maybe a dying man's last, desperate act. You try spitting at the baron, a final act of defiance, but your mouth's too dry, too full of blood and bile. The crowd thins as the grim novelty wears off. Only the professionals remain. The scribe, diligently noting every scream for official records. The surgeon, a man of cold, clinical interest, observing how long consciousness lasts after certain fractures. The priest, hovering like a vulture, waiting to offer last rites you'll refuse out of pure, unadulterated spite. The executioner pauses, his face grim, to wipe sweat from his forehead, despite the bitter cold. His assistant offers him ale from a leather flask, a moment of mundane human connection in a scene of ultimate horror. Summer heat might have brought feverish unconsciousness faster, a merciful escape. Winter, however, keeps you present, every nerve sparking as frost forms on your bleeding shins, a chilling, constant reminder. They've moved to your arms now. The right requires adjustments. The assistant braces your wrist at a sharper, more painful angle. When the hammer falls this time, the pain whites out your vision for several seconds, a brief, blessed oblivion. You come back to the scribe, his face a blur, asking if you have any last words. Apparently, you've been singing. Odd. You don't remember that. Dying on the wheel wasn't always guaranteed. Some victims, stubborn and agonizing, lasted weeks, begging villagers for scraps or mercy killings. Your executioner, however, seems determined to finish before sundown. The final hammer blows cave in your ribs, methodically, left side first, to avoid crushing the heart too soon. Each impact sends fresh blood bubbling up your throat, a final, metallic taste. The taste reminds you of that time you ate raw liver on a dare as a child, your mother scolding you for wasting good meat. Consciousness fades in waves, a merciful ebb and flow. One moment you're screaming curses at the Baron, your voice raw and broken. Next, you're watching snowflakes land on your own mangled hands, marveling, in a detached, ethereal way, at how they don't melt. Somewhere beyond the square, a dog barks at nothing, an utterly meaningless sound. Your last clear thought, before the final, consuming darkness, is about the monk's robe they stripped off you hours ago, the one that scratched your neck. The real brother Tobias, you think with a strange, dark amusement, probably got it back. He'll never know how badly it scratched your neck. Failure wasn't an option, it was a spectacle. And spectacles, you discovered, were meant to be remembered. The blood on your dagger is still warm, a fleeting metallic comfort. The Lord, in his opulent chambers, is very much not. Outside, a dog barks at nothing, a sound that screams your presence to the silent night. This, you realise, is the most dangerous moment when the job's done, but you're still trapped inside the kill zone. That giddiness in your chest isn't triumph. It's pure, unadulterated adrenaline with nowhere to go. Snow blows in, soft and insidious, flecking the dead man's velvet robes with temporary, crystalline stars. You wipe your blade on his fine bedding, the silk surprisingly absorbent. Time to vanish. Success in this grim trade smells like smoke and poor decisions. The Lord's evening fire still crackles merrily in the hearth as you creep down the servant's stair, each creak of the ancient wood a potential death knell. Somewhere above, a page boy, probably sleepy and bored, will find the body soon enough. By dawn, every road, every bridge, every village will have checkpoints, guards with cold eyes and sharper blades. The reel's work, you understand with a sickening lurch, starts now. The not dying part. Flimsy promise, pledged 30 silver pieces for this kill. The merchant who hired you, your treacherous client, waits at the Crossroads Inn, or so he said. Clients, you've learned, rarely honoured agreements. Nobles especially, pretended not to recognise you, their memories conveniently erased. Bishops sent intermediaries who forgot the purse, their hands empty. Once, a particularly cruel wool trader paid you in freshly slaughtered mutton, 50 pounds of bleeding meat that attracted every stray dog for miles, making your escape a cacophony of snarls and barks. Tonight's employer, you recall, seemed shifty even by those abysmal standards. At your meeting, he kept touching his throat nervously, like he expected a blade there already. His boots were too clean for winter roads, a telling sign. His handshake left your palm suspiciously damp, cold and clammy. The night air hits your face like a physical slap, stealing your breath. You take the long way to the inn, doubling back twice, your eyes darting into every shadow, checking for followers. Winter, that cruel mistress, makes surveillance easier for them. Footsteps crunch loudly on the frozen ground, breaths fogged like telltale plumes of smoke, and every naked branch offers clear sightlines. That shadow by the well, you notice, isn't moving right, too still, too heavy. You duck behind the tanner's shed, the stench of cured hides a familiar comfort, counting heartbeats until the figure passes. Not a guard, just some drunk pissing against the wall, his misery a small temporary relief. Payment locations were always sesh, always. Crossroads offered tempting escape routes for the client, not for you. Taverns provided a dozen convenient witnesses who'd swear they saw nothing, absolving the client. One assassin, the legends go, reportedly got his coin in a cemetery at midnight, only to realise too late the gravediggers were hired knives, their shovels quickly exchanged for swords. The night's inn slumps at the junction of two frozen farm roads, a dark, unwelcoming silhouette. No stable boy out front, no horses, no welcoming light in the upper windows, just a single flickering candle in the tap room, a beacon for your doom. You circle the building twice, a predator in a frozen, empty landscape. The kitchen yard shows one set of footprints leading in, none coming out. Inside, through a crack in the shutter, the merchant sits alone at a trestle table, 2 cups before him. His cloak's hem is muddy in a way that suggests recent, hard riding, a desperate flight. The second cup steams faintly. You hesitate in the doorway, your hand on your dagger. 1 cup means a private drink, 2 means company expected. 3 would mean... His fingers drum a nervous staccato rhythm on the table beside a leather pouch that clinks, a hollow, mocking sound. Count it if you like. Every killer develops instincts, a cold, primal awareness. The way this man's eyes dart to the ceiling loft, a flicker of fear. How his left hand stays stubbornly under the table, hidden. That faint metallic scent beneath the cloying sweetness of the mulled wine. You step sideways, keeping the heavy door at your back, a fragile shield. The pouch scrapes across the wood toward you, a slow, agonizing slide. 30 silver pieces. It would buy a month at a decent inn, out of the cold. New boots. A bribe for some ship's captain to take you south, far away. The coins feel surprisingly warm when you spill them into your palm. Too warm. Fresh from the mint, not some hidden strongbox. The kind of coin nobles pay retainers with. The kind that gets remembered, traced. You glance up as the merchant's chair creaks, a small, sudden movement. His left hand emerges holding nothing. His right disappears into his robes. Success, you realize with a jolt, requires predictable patterns. Count the money slowly. Argue about the sum. Demand bonus payment for unexpected complications. Instead, you fling the hot coin straight at his face. A shower of silver that glitters in the candlelight, and bolt. The crossbow bolt, meant for your spine, thuds into the doorframe just as you dive headlong into the night, the sound a dull, sickening impact. That duke in Normandy always paid exactly half up front through intermediaries, and hired a second assassin to follow the first, just in case. The abbess in Alsace preferred poisoned wine served by pretty, unsuspecting novices. Some patrons left payment with corrupt sheriffs, knowing you'd have to outbribe them, risking capture just to collect. Tonight's merchant, a brute in fine clothing, chose direct violence, a crude but effective method. His hired archer in the loft couldn't hit a running target in the dark, but they'll have horses somewhere. Friends in the next town. Relatives with long, unforgiving memories. You crash through a frozen hedgerow, thorns scraping your cheeks, leaving trails of blood. The coin pouch stays behind. Too identifiable, too much of a risk. Silver buys safety, but only if you live to spend it. Morning will find you 12 miles west, bartering desperately with a fishwife for passage downriver. She'll charge triple the normal rate, because winter makes everyone greedy, everyone a shark. You'll pay without complaint, because assassins can't afford records of their travel, can't afford to be remembered. No keepsakes heavier than what fits in your boots. That time in Burgundy when you slept in a real bed for a week, a luxury beyond imagining. The innkeeper's daughter recognized your knife style, a small, fatal detail. The winter you holed up in an abandoned siege tower, a temporary sanctuary. The local lord decided to rebuild it come spring, forcing you out. Even staying still was movement. Changing names, altering gates, pretending to be someone just passing through forever, a ghost in the making. Dawn finds you huddled in a ferryman's leaky skiff, the freezing water sloshing around your ankles, watching the inn's chimney fade into the distance, a wisp of smoke, a memory. The fishwife, her eyes as cold and knowing as the winter sky, eyes your belt knife with professional interest, making her own calculations. You cough, a wet, rattling sound that hasn't left since that night in the rain-swept churchyard, a constant companion. The river carries you south, toward warmer towns with different wanted posters, different faces. The water smells like dead reeds and old snow, a scent of perpetual ending. Somewhere behind you, a wealthy merchant, his face a picture of indignant honesty, explains to his associates how the assassin, a shadowy fiend, tried to rob him. The sheriff's men, diligently, compose a description for new wanted notices, adding new, increasingly inaccurate details. A maid at the Crossroads Inn, sweeping up the morning's mess, pockets a silver piece that rolled under the ale barrel. A small, illicit treasure. And you? You're already calculating how much a forged pilgrim's badge will cost in the next village. Another layer of lies, another step into the void. The only reward, you realize with bitter clarity, was another day in the cold. And the cold, you know, never ended. The fire, a greedy, hungry thing, eats your last letter slowly. The parchment curls at the edges first, your sister's careful, unfamiliar handwriting blackening into nonsense. You don't remember what it says anymore. You never learned to read it properly. Your skills focused on more immediate, brutal necessities. But the wax seal still shows your family's mark, or what used to be your family's mark. They're all dead now. 3 winters of famine saw to that, silently, efficiently. The wax bubbles and pops in the flames, a tiny final protest. Identity, you understand, is the first thing they take. That peasant name you were born with, forgotten after your first kill, a meaningless whisper. The village where you played as a child, full of sun and laughter. Burned to ash during some distant lord's feud, a casualty of someone else's ambition. Even your face changes. Scars accumulate, a map of your brutal life, cheeks hollow from hunger, eyes narrowed from squinting into too many blizzards. That frozen puddle you passed yesterday, a brief, distorted mirror. Was your nose always that crooked? Did your hair used to be that grey? You don't remember. Winter, paradoxically, helps with disappearance. Footprints, even fresh ones, fill overnight, leaving no trace. You learn tricks, breaking boot soles with rocks to change your gait, rubbing ash into your hairline to mimic receding hairlines, adopting regional accents you overhear at inns. The goal isn't to become someone new, a better person. It's to become no one at all. Clients, those treacherous paymasters, arrange this erasure deliberately. The merchant who hired you last month called you that mute fellow, even though you'd spoken. The knight who wanted his rival dead referred to you as the left-handed one, though you're fiercely right-handed. The dark-haired man, the fellow with the limp. Eventually, just the one who does that sort of work, a nameless, faceless functionary of death. By the end, they'll describe you as a shadow, a bad dream, something that maybe didn't happen at all, a figment of fear. You burn other things too, shedding your past like dead skin. The cloak from your first kill reeked of blood, no matter how many times you washed it in freezing rivers. That tavern girl's ribbon, a fleeting moment of connection, got tossed into a canal after she started asking too many questions about your scars. Even weapons get ditched. That nice dagger with the bone handle, a rare luxury, had to go when the sheriff started asking about its previous owner. Objects, you realize, hold memories. And memories, in this life, get you hanged. Official records, those meticulous chronicles of the powerful, won't mention you. The merchant, stabbed in an alley, gets recorded as footpad robbery, another anonymous statistic. Ooh. Your work lives only in whispers, in sideways glances between servants, in the sudden, inexplicable way widows suddenly inherit fortunes. No ballads sing of your exploits, no epic poems glorify your deeds. No wanted posters, accurate ones anyway, carry your real likeness. The only proof you existed is the empty space where your targets used to be. The absence you created. The night the bishop died, you were drunk in a barn. According to 3 witnesses you paid with stolen wine, their memories conveniently lubricated. When the countess suffocated in her bed, you'd supposedly been seen miles away at a pilgrimage site. Never mind that the gullible monk who swore to it mistook you for a different, equally anonymous sinner. You plant these false trails compulsively, meticulously, like a farmer sowing salt, ensuring nothing grows in your wake. Languages slip away first, dissolving into the cold. That lullaby your mother sang? Only the tune remains, a haunting melody, the words lost to time. The local dialect from your homeland, once so familiar, comes out garbled now, mixed with accents from a dozen towns you've passed through. Sometimes you dream in languages you don't recognize, a babble of unknown words. The names go next. Your childhood friends, your cousins, even your own given name sounds wrong. Alien, when you whisper it to the dark, to the empty spaces. Work, brutal and relentless, leaves marks regardless. That knuckle never set right after the Baron's bodyguard broke it, a permanent, painful reminder. The cough you developed from hiding in freezing attics never quite faded, a rasping companion. You rub your thumb over the notch in your ribs, where the sheriff's arrow grazed you last winter, a moment of exquisite pain, a near miss. The body remembers what the mind tries, desperately, to forget. There's a particular horror in realizing you've been here before. That tavern's crooked doorframe looks familiar, disturbingly so. The miller's daughter has her mother's eyes, the same mother you poisoned a decade ago when she recognized your voice. You've become the wandering stranger grandparents warn about, the bad omen that follows harvest failures, the whisper of death. Towns blur together. You start wondering if you've already killed this particular lord before, if this is just a nightmare on repeat. Clients, with their callous indifference, ensure the erasure. The lord who hired you to kill his troublesome brother now weeps dramatically at the funeral, blaming bandits or illness. The merchant who paid for his rival's poisoning suddenly develops food sensitivities, casting suspicious glances at all his terrified servants. Your existence, your very humanity, becomes their dirty secret, their shame, something to be scrubbed from memory with ruthless efficiency. Winter accelerates the process of erasure. Snow covers the bloodstains on your cloak, a pristine white shroud. Ice smooths over the chisel marks where you pried open that window, leaving no trace. The cold numbs your face into anonymity, cheeks red and rough, lips chapped beyond recognition. The grove was cut down for firewood 2 winters back, its trees felled, its name forgotten. A neighbour who nods to you without fear, without suspicion. Then you wake, usually, in another ditch behind another tavern, another stolen cloak pulled tight against the biting wind, and the dream dissolves like breath fog in the cruel dawn, leaving only the cold. The last step always comes at night, alone. You bury the final traces, that childhood trinket, a lock of hair you carried too long, the scrap of map showing where you were born. The earth accepts these offerings without comment, a silent, indifferent witness. Nearby, an owl calls, its cry a mournful dirge. Somewhere a dog barks, a distant, lonely sound. The past makes a quiet thud as it hits the bottom of the hole, finally buried. Reflections stop recognizing you first. Then stray cats, whose eyes hold no fear, no recognition. Finally, one morning, you realize you don't recognize yourself either. The face in the frozen trough could be anyone, some starving traveller, some bandit, some ghost. Your hands, those instruments of death, perform their murderous work without needing your mind's permission anymore. The knife feels lighter every year, a part of you. In the end, you weren't a person, you were a ghost. And ghosts, you learn, don't get happy endings. The first time you hear villagers whisper, "Devil Walker," as you pass. A hushed, terrified murmur, it almost makes you laugh. A dry, humorless sound. They don't see a man when they look at you. They see an ill wind given flesh, a malevolent spirit. Your footprints are too light in the snow, they murmur, too precise. Shadows cling to you strangely, they whisper. The next morning, 3 old women, their faces etched with fear, hung witches' knots on the church door. Superstition, that pervasive, crippling fear, paints you as something more than human, something far, far worse. A miller's daughter screams, a raw, primal sound. When you remove your gloves to count coins, convinced your fingers are fused, monstrous. The blacksmith, a burly man who fears nothing earthly, refuses to sharpen your dagger, muttering about cursed steel, about unholy metal. Someone spread a tale that your eyes reflect no light, that they are empty pools of darkness. Never mind that you haven't slept properly in weeks, that the hollowed-out gaze of exhaustion simply reads Kos as supernatural menace. Winter, that brutal season, feeds these fears, turning rational men into quivering mystics. That unexpected snowfall, thick and silent after the Lord's death. Clearly you're doing a dark omen. The well freezing over solid on the very day of your arrival. You learn to avoid sneezing in public. One peasant claims your breath summons storms. Your chronic cough, a persistent companion, gets misinterpreted as demonic whispering, as a pact with infernal forces. Even basic survival skills, honed by desperation, mark you. Tracking prey becomes speaking with animals. Melting snow for water gets called unnatural thirst, a sign of the unholy. Churches, ironically, make the worst hiding places. Huddled behind a confessional, shivering in the echoing cold, you listen as the priest tells his flock how assassins steal faces from corpses, how they curse doorways so death follows families for generations, how their blades drink souls. The congregation crosses themselves, their faces pale with terror. So do you, out of reflex, a muscle memory, then immediately regret it when the old wood creaks, drawing every eye. Every candle suddenly seems brighter, every rustle of vestments like approaching footsteps, every shadow a lurking demon. Your tools, those mundane instruments of your trade, invite the wildest, most terrifying theories. That vial of headache powder, a desperate purchase. Demon's salt, they whisper. The lockpicks, carefully crafted. A tavern girl once swore, her eyes wide with fear, that your whetstone whispered to her. Never mind, it was just you humming through chapped lips, a tuneless, desperate sound. People find meaning in every oddity, every deviation from the norm. The way you navigate dark hallways becomes night-seeing, an unholy gift. Your habit of counting exits becomes marking souls, a tally of your victims. Even silence backfires. When you refused communion that time in Bruges, 3 women fainted at your holy defiance. The rumours, like a disease, precede you now. The next town over, a baker, his hands trembling, throws salt at your shadow, a desperate act of protection. When you ask directions, mothers clutch their children's baptismal medals, shielding them from your gaze. You stop bathing in streams. Too many stories about assassins washing away their human scent. Stop visiting barbers, somehow the long-haired killer. Sounds more frightening, more demonic, in whispers. Villages with recent, unexplained deaths blame you first, their fear a ready narrative. Towns with sickly livestock assume you poisoned the troughs, even if you never went near them. Once, you woke to find a dead hare nailed above your rented stall, its frozen eyes staring accusingly. Some farmer's desperate idea of protective magic. You burned it, the stench of singed fur. a small, dark comfort. That papal bull calling assassins, soulless husks, unholy creatures, gets read aloud at every market square. Its words are public branding. Priests warn that killers carry the mark of Cain where no one can see it, an invisible spiritual scar. You find yourself checking your own wrists in rare moments of privacy, your fingers tracing phantom marks. Just in case. A ferryman near Marseille charged triple, claiming assassins sink boats by the weight of their sins, a moral burden. In Normandy, a miller, trembling with terror, locked his daughter in the cellar for a week after you bought flour, a desperate act of protection. You stop wondering why. The reasons change, the panic doesn't. Your appearance, ravaged by hunger and hardship, doesn't help. Years of starvation sharpen your cheeks to knife points. The permanent squint from snow glare makes you look scheming, malevolent. That scar from the lion job, a jagged line on your cheek, obviously a witch's brand, a sign of your dark pacts. Your chapped lips peel in strange, grotesque patterns, perfect for village gossips to divine as cursed sigils, symbols of evil. Mobs form faster in winter, their fear coalescing in the long dark nights. Fewer chores mean more time for fear, mongering for whispering tales of dread. You learn to read the signs. Lowered voices near wells. Children abruptly called indoors. The too casual way men sharpen scythes at twilight, a silent threat. That time outside Reims, you barely escaped the torch. Wielding farmers who swore you'd blighted their crops, never mind it was November, and frost kills indiscriminately. Folk claim you distill mistletoe berries under gallows, using the blood of the hanged. That you render fat from unbaptized babies, a truly monstrous act. An apothecary in Dijon once refused you henbane, his voice a terrified whisper, speaking about the last assassin who bought some. How the man's hair turned white overnight, how his shadow peeled away from his body, a phantom limb. You didn't correct him. The lies, you realize, make useful, terrifying camouflage. Churches, again, compound the terror. That fresco in Auxerre shows assassins with goat eyes and barbed tongues, a demonic caricature. A travelling friar near Orléans claims to have exorcised 3 of you last winter, his voice booming with righteous zeal. You stop taking communion when you realise the wafer burns your tongue. From quicklime in the baking flour, probably, but try explaining that during a witch panic. Language itself twists against you, becoming a weapon. What was once called stealth becomes unnatural quiet, a sign of unnatural powers. Observation turns into the evil eye, a malevolent gaze that brings misfortune. Even necessary skills backfire. Your ability to track becomes scenting souls. Your fast healing marks you as touched by hell. Beyond human. The limping assassin of Provence supposedly dragged a cloven hoof. Certain deaths, particularly brutal or mysterious ones, stick in the imagination. When a baron's son convulses after supper, they remember you passed through months earlier. Obviously you planted slow-acting curses, a lingering death. A stillborn calf, a tragedy for any farmer, becomes proof you walked the fields at moonrise, a harbinger of ill omen. You learn to check almanacs for eclipses and comets, anything that might excuse staying indoors unseen. Weather itself gets personalised, becoming an extension of your malevolence. That unseasonal thaw during the Lyon job, evidence you melted winter's grasp, an unnatural power. The hailstorm after the Rouen contract, divine punishment for harbouring you. Never mind that farmers prayed for rain just last week. Now the flooded creek is your doing too, a testament to your destructive power. You learn to lean into some myths for protection, using their fear as a shield. Let them think you can turn invisible at will. It makes guards hesitate, uncertain. Spread whispers that touching you causes palsy. Useful when merchants get grabby, their hands recoiling. That time you pretended to curse a tavern door, spitting and muttering. It actually kept the sheriff out for 3 days. His men too superstitious to cross the threshold. Superstition, you realize, cuts both ways, a double-edged sword. The worst is hearing your own legend grow, distorted and monstrous. In Toulouse, they say you strangle men with their own shadows, stealing their very essence. Near Bordeaux, children chant rhymes about your lantern eyes. Glowing in the dark. A scullery maid in Claremont swore you walked through walls, a spectral presence. Never mind you'd bribed her for the cellar key. Sometimes, though, the fears help. That noble steward dropped his sword, his face pale, when you simply smiled. Some nonsense about assassins having iron teeth. A predatory grin. A gatekeeper in Nantes let you pass unchecked, too scared to meet your soul-stealing gaze, averting his eyes. But mostly, it just means sleeping in colder, more isolated ditches, buying supplies at triple rates, watching every hand near their coat pockets, anticipating betrayal. Dogs hate you on principle now. Not for what you've done, not for your actions, for what their masters believe you are, a monster. Same difference, you realize, in the end. You toss scraps to strays when no one's looking, a pointless, almost compassionate habit. The beasts still snarl, their teeth bared as you pass, their primal fear unshakable. Fear, you learn, turned every shadow into an enemy. And enemies, you discover, were everywhere. The inn, it smells like all the others, smoke, stale piss and yesterday's stew, vaguely unsettling. You've been here before. Not this exact tavern, not this precise corner, but this exact, soul-crushing moment, same hunched posture over the ale, same carefully cultivated fake limp, same stolen name scribbled hastily in the landlord's ledger. The kitchen boy stares, his young eyes lingering a beat too long, too curious. Doesn't matter, you think with a weary resignation. You'll be gone by dawn, another ghost by morning. The whispered offer came 3 nights back at the crossroads, a fleeting promise in the dark. Another lord. Another grudge. Another pouch of silver that might or might not contain half what was promised. Winter contracts, you've learned, have a brutal rhythm to them. Early December brings desperate nobles trying to tidy up messy inheritances before the pretense of Christmas feasts. January's for settling merchant disputes. Quiet eliminations before spring caravans resume their routes. February's when clients get stingy, when coin is scarce. Right now it's the first brittle week of March, that awful stretch where last year's meagre grain runs low, and this year's thaw hasn't quite come, leaving the world suspended in a cold, hungry limbo. Perfect timing for a poisoning, though. Everyone blames spoiled meat or a sudden fatal chill. You swirl the murky ale, watching the sediment settle in familiar, depressing patterns. Your tools, those extensions of your grim purpose, come out of hiding with practiced, weary motions. The garrote, carefully braided from stolen horsehair, its strands stiff with cold. That little lead vial of apothecary's special, bought from a back-alley chemist who definitely won't remember your face tomorrow, or even today. They're not the same tools you used last winter, or the winter before, or even the one before that, but they might as well be. The motions never change. Test the blade's edge. Listen for footsteps outside the door, for the crunch of snow, for the sound of your own impending doom. Clients, you realize, follow patterns too. Predictable and pathetic. This one's the 4th southpaw lordling who's hired you to handle a delicate matter, involving a pregnant mistress, an inconvenient complication. He even used the same euphemism. The willow garden needs pruning, spoken with a false bravado. The first time, years ago, you didn't get the metaphor until it was too late. Now you recognize the violet-scented sealing wax these types favor. The way they always pay 1/3 up front in freshly minted coin, traceable as hell. Targets, after a while, become utterly interchangeable. The same gouty hands clutching bed hangings. Identical surprised wheezes when the blade goes in, a wet, sickening sound. You could write a treatise on the acoustics of dying chambers, how stone walls make death rattles echo, how heavy tapestry muffles the good stuff, the quick, desperate gasps. Last month's Mark even wore that same amber ring you pried off a different corpse 3 winters back, a chilling echo. You check your own hands. When did those scars, those indelible marks blur together, becoming one indistinct map of violence? Escape routes, those desperate paths to freedom, show eerie similarities. The postern gate disguised as a buttery. The garderobe chute that drops into the freezing moat. You develop a sixth sense for which guards take bribes and which take offence, a distinction that means life or death. The real surprise isn't the patterns, it's that anyone, after all this time, still falls for them. Coin disappears the same way too, a constant predictable drain. Half up front in traceable silver. A quarter upon completion if you're lucky, if the client doesn't simply vanish. The rest, the true bulk of your payment, vanishes into the usual infuriating excuses. The steward's sudden, convenient trip abroad, the mysteriously misplaced ledger, the armed men who mistake you for a common highwayman, their blades already drawn. You used to argue, to demand your due. Now you simply factor the inevitable loss into your pricing, a grim accounting of betrayal. Winter landscapes blur together in your very bones, a monotonous, endless canvas of suffering. Same frozen ruts in the roads, same icicles daggering from the same thatched eaves. You wake in yet another ditch, your breath fogging yet another dawn, and for one groggy, terrifying moment you can't remember which province you're in, which cold, indifferent land. The scars don't help. That puckered one on your thigh could have come from Lyon or Bruges, or maybe that botched job near Mainz. The details, you realise, don't matter. Only the grim, inescapable cycle does. Contracts, you find, start reading the same, their words hollow and meaningless. The widow who swears this is her only enemy, a single, righteous grievance. The merchant who's good for it, his word, his bond. The priest who pays with stolen sacramental plate, hoping to buy absolution through your sin. You could set your circadian rhythm to their lying tells. The slight catch in the throat when mentioning payment, the too quick assurance that no one will investigate, their eyes darting away. Even the handwriting looks familiar, quill strokes narrowing under cost pressure, wax seals cracking along old familiar fault lines. The isolation follows predictable curves too, a slow, agonizing descent into madness. First month after a job, jumpy, seeing knives in every stranger's belt, in every shadow. Second month, talking to stray dogs for company, their silent presence a small comfort. Third month, forgetting basic courtesies, like how to request bread without sounding like you're demanding tribute, your voice harsh and unpracticed. You catch your reflection in a frozen trough, your face a gaunt, unfamiliar mask, and can't recall the last time you spoke your real name aloud. If it even is your real name anymore. Tools wear out in expected, predictable sequences. Daggers lose their edge mid-job, failing when you need them most. Boot soles separate at the worst possible moment, leaving your feet exposed to the unforgiving cold. That waterproof cloak you bargained for last autumn now leaks in exactly the same spot as the one before it, a familiar, chilling dampness. You don't replace items so much as rotate through identical disappointments, a grim carousel of unreliable gear. Betrayal, that constant companion, happens on schedule. The client who swears he'll vouch for you suddenly develops amnesia, his memory conveniently erased. The innkeeper who promised discretion starts leaving your door unlatched, a silent warning. Even nature collaborates. The snowstorm that masks your approach always melts just in time to reveal your escape route, a cruel, mocking gesture. You've started betting against yourself just for sport, a desperate game. Safe houses offer diminishing returns, their fleeting comfort eroding over time. That charming ruin with the dry cellar. crumbled last spring, burying your hopes. The whore who never asked questions, her company a rare, temporary solace. Married a bailiff, exchanging her secrets for security. You recycle the same 5 hiding spots until they're not hiding spots anymore, just memorials to your dwindling luck, your inevitable capture. The church crypt you used last winter now sports fresh padlocks and what looks like your own wanted poster nailed to the door, a chilling welcome. Superstitions, those irrational fears, calcify into routine, into rigid rituals. That nonsense about spitting 3 times before a job started as a joke, a dark jest. Now you do it without thinking, a reflexive, desperate plea to whatever dark forces might be listening. You develop entire rituals around blade sharpening, boot lacing, the specific way you count ceiling beams before sleeping. Break the pattern, you tell yourself, and you might as well walk directly to the gallows, your fate sealed. Clothing wears out in telling, predictable ways. The right sleeve always frays first from dagger draws, a constant, abrasive motion. Your left shoelace snaps more often, something about the angle when crouching, when hiding. Even your hood sags in the same spot where you routinely clutch it closed against the biting wind, a permanent deformation. You could carbon date your career by the layers of patched fabric, by the accumulating wear and tear. Food becomes a series of decreasing tolerances, a grim descent. Last year, you'd have balked at maggoty cheese, your stomach recoiling. Now you pick out the wrigglers and, with a grim determination, call it protein. That tavern stew with the suspicious lumps. You've eaten its identical twin in 6 provinces, its taste a familiar horror. The bread's always hardest on the 4th day. You've developed calluses just for chewing it, your jaw aching. The nightmares follow shifts you could set a sundial by. A predictable cycle of terror. Early winter, dreams of capture, of the hangman's noose. Midwinter, recurring visions of frozen corpses with your face, their eyes accusing. Late winter, that's when the dreams get creative, truly sadistic, drowning in coin purses, being buried under wanted posters, running through endless corridors where every single door opens onto the same scaffold, the same waiting wheel. Now you wonder if there ever was a before. The childhood memories, faint and flickering, could be borrowed from stories overheard in taverns, from the lives of others. That lullaby you sometimes hum, a melody of a forgotten past, might belong to someone else entirely. Even your oldest knife, the one you've somehow kept, feels like it's always been in your hand, an extension of your grim purpose. Winter strips away escape routes one by one, methodically, relentlessly. The smuggling tunnel collapsed under spring rains, its entrance now a forgotten mound of earth. That sympathetic nun who hid you in the scriptorium, her eyes full of pity, transferred to a convent across the mountains 1,000 miles away. Every exit closes eventually, leaving you nowhere to run. The cough, that persistent, hacking sound, worsens predictably too. Starts as an annoyance in November, a tickle in your throat. By February it rips through your ribs like a saw, tearing at your lungs. Come March, you'll spit black phlegm into the snow, a dark, viscous stain, and pretend not to notice the specks that might be blood or might be soot. Doesn't matter which, the result's the same. The result's the same, that cruel torturer does funny things to time. You wake, sometimes, certain you've already lived this day. Same creaking floorboard, same far-off dog bark, same ache in the knuckles where frostbite gnawed deepest. Maybe you have. The job 2 winters back in that burger's house. Same dim corridor, same snoring target, same moment of agonizing hesitation before the killing stroke. Clients, you realize, become utterly indistinguishable after a while, their faces blurring into a single mask of greed and fear. The same trembling hands offering purses. Identical nervous tics when lying about payment. You've stopped learning their names, they're just roles now. The greedy merchant, the conniving uncle. The bishop who blinks too much. None of them see you as human anymore either. You're a symptom of their bad decisions, a living receipt for their sins, a tool. Targets blur together faster, a monotonous parade of victims. One more merchant wheezing through wine-sodden dreams. You could write a manual on the acoustics of death. The wet gasp of the slit throat versus the dry rattle of poison. The subtleties of their demise. Sometimes you forget which method you used on whom, the details fading like old memories. The only constant, the only unwavering truth is the cold. It greets you each morning with its familiar, biting embrace. It numbs your hands during crucial moments, turning skill into clumsy fumbling. It keeps the bloodstains fresh on your cloak, longer than they'd ever last in summer, a permanent scarlet badge. When you finally collapse in some nameless alley, and you will, you know you will, it'll be the cold that gets the credit, not the guards, not the poison, not even the life, the brutal, relentless life that led you here. The only escape, you realize with a cold, clear certainty, was death. And death, you know, was always waiting. So, next time you see some slick, effortlessly cool assassin in a film, remember the frozen, miserable truth. No honourable codes, just treacherous clients vanishing like morning fog, leaving you exposed and unpaid. No dramatic last stands, no heroic sacrifices, just forgotten corpses in unmarked snowdrifts, their lives snuffed out without a whisper. Being a medieval assassin didn't mean wielding power in the shadows. It meant surviving betrayal more often than sword fights, bargaining with hunger more than kings, and praying your breath didn't give you away. Let me know in the comments. Would you take the contract, knowing how it really ends? If you endured this icy descent into history, if you genuinely enjoyed this frostbitten tale from the past, then hit like and subscribe for more unglamorous truths and brutal realities.